All right, let's go to, speaking of which, let's go to Cy Young, American League Cy Young. I have an interesting pick here, but I'm going to let you go first on this one because I
Yeah.
think, honestly, from a betting perspective, I actually think this is pretty good value too.
Yeah. So my pick for American League Cy Young is George Kirby. I
Yeah,
think
I can't
George
see.
Kirby at 13-1. Um, this guy was just really good last year and really consistent. And I don't want to touch on all the same things I said last week, right? Because last week I talked about the fact that he just doesn't miss the zone. The 2.5% walk rate last year was ridiculous. The fastball velo is strong. The chase rate's high, despite the fact that he's in the zone all the time. Pitching run value 96th percentile last year, fastball run value 98th percentile last year. The guy's just a stud, and he's really consistent, and he's in a pitcher's park, and he's surrounded by a good rotation. He's going to eat innings. To me, at 13-1 in a league that doesn't have any like killer candidates for it, like Gerrit Cole probably missing a month or two, that's going to make it hard for him to win that award. Doesn't mean he can't, but it's going to make it hard.
But the fact
Gausman.
that he still can, in a sense, I think speaks to something in the American League as far as pitching.
Sure, sure. You look at Kevin Gausman, like good pitcher. I don't know if he's a guy that I think is that consistent though. Same thing with Framber Valdez. A lot of the advanced metrics on Valdez say that he's due for negative regression. So
Mm-hmm.
we'll see about that. Burns is great, but going from the NL Central to the AL East, that's going to be worth something. So we'll
Yeah,
see. So for me, it's a pretty wide open field, and I think he's the best pitcher on a really good staff. So I'm going with Kirby at 13-1.
I know. I feel like that's a stronger opinion than you think it is. That George Kirby is the best pitcher on that staff. Luis Castillo is very, very, very good.
Yeah, he is.
It may be considered, you might be treading into hot take territory there, Dalton Brown. I'm just saying.
I'm fine with it,
Um,
man. I'll ride that take into the season, and we'll see. I drafted George Kirby in fantasy last season, and I got him a great value, and he carried me to an 18-2 record. So
yeah. Well, hey, okay. Well, then, listen, let the record speak for itself. Let's just say that. All right. So, American League Cy Young, I want to get your thoughts on this because I think he could be set up for a career year, especially, and we're going to touch on it in a little bit, for the shape that division is in. I really think that Pablo Lopez has a good shot at winning this award. I really do. I look, the reality is for me with Pablo Lopez is that he's going into his age 28 season, and it just seems like he's going to enter the prime of his career. He's going to give you innings. The last 2 years, he's been putting over 180 innings under his belt. He's the ace of that staff in Minnesota. And truth be told, he's going to get numerous starts against, and again, I'd be lying if I said that this wasn't part of the deciding factor where he could be gouging his stats a little bit by facing weaker competition, but he's going to get multiple starts, I'm sure, against Kansas City, against Chicago, against the Detroit Tigers. Like, he's going to be getting starts against weaker teams. Listen, I saw him at DraftKings. I saw him at DraftKings today at plus 1,400 for the award. I think that's pretty serious value. The stuff has really always been there for him. It's about him putting it all together. In the last 3 years or so, he really kind of has, and he's been really productive in Minnesota. What do you make about that?
no, if you told me, Dalton, you can't pick George Kirby, you got to go somewhere else, probably the next place I'd look. And for a lot of the reasons that you mentioned, that division is awful. But man, you take a look at his Baseball Savant page, it is all red. And that's good for folks who don't look at Baseball
Yeah.
Savant much. We're talking 95 percentile chase rate, 87 percentile K rate, 93rd percentile expected ERA, pitching run value at 98th percentile. There's no real way to look at it and not view him as one of the best pitchers in baseball with who he was last year.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. He's pitching in a division where he should be able to dominate. I also don't think it hurts that he's pitching in the cold in April and in
Yeah.
September. It's hard to hit when it's cold, man.
It is.
So I think it's a good pick. I think it's a good pick. Hey, I got the Twins hat on for a reason. One of my best buddies works for the team, and they're definitely my AL team. So I hope you're right. I'd love to see it.
Yeah. Hey, listen, my great uncle Paul, who's the brother-in-law of my dad's sister, Grew up in Southeast Minnesota. I always have had a soft spot for the Minnesota Twins. Always root for them to do well. It's just they just seem like, and again, we don't have to go too crazy on this, but they've always seemed like a relatively likable team for me. Also because they lose to the Yankees in pretty serious fashion every year in the postseason anyway. So I don't really have a reason not to like them.
I mean, you're preaching to the choir on that. My fiance and I go up there. We go to Minneapolis on July 4th every year and visit my buddy who works for the Twins, and we get to hang out in the Delta Sky Club for a couple games. And the people that you meet up there are a different kind of nice. So
Yeah.
it's an easy franchise to root for. It's a really underrated ballpark. I can't recommend Target Field enough.
Yeah, it's great.
It's a really a fun fan experience. So
Yeah.
go
The one game I went there was in the Delta Sky Club, and we ran into Paul Molitor there. We ran into PJ Fleck. Like there were definitely some guys there, some notable names in the Delta Sky Club. They have a good fan base over there in Minnesota. So all right, let's go to the National League. I'm chalk on this one, man. I got Spencer Strider. Like I just think this is the year, I think, where he gets it done. I just do. I think at this point, after, I mean, some would consider it, from a truth perspective, because I know he finished fourth in the Cy Young voting last year, but he had a 3.86 ERA, right? Like, I think a lot of people kind of viewed that as like, we kind of didn't expect that. But listen, from what he had the season before, he's going to give you the innings, right? 186 and 2/3 last year. He led the majors in strikeouts. K per 9 was unbelievable. One of the things that I love, by the way, this is one of my favorite stats in baseball, is fielding independent pitching. I think that that's a really valuable stat because it just goes to show you what your ERA would be with league average defense. And I think that that's a really valuable stat to go off of. I just think as far as, him entering, he's still outrageously young. He's entering his age 25 season. And again, it's sort of a similar reason for Pablo Lopez. The NL East is a much better division than the AL Central. But you and I have even discussed this separately where, you're kind of seeing a Nationals team that isn't very good, a Mets team that I think could very easily digress. The Marlins really haven't done much to help themselves in this offseason. So you're kind of dealing with another guy who could be facing much more inferior teams when it comes to a lot of the starts that he's going to make. And again, I just feel like eventually one of these years, the stuff is just all going to come together and he's just going to have an unbelievable season, right? Because as far as stuff is concerned, Spencer Strider is one of the best in the game. Kind of boring because I know it's kind of chalk. He's plus 450 for the award, but what do you think? Spencer Strider on that?
I mean, I don't think it's a bad pick in terms of like if you're just trying to pick a winner. I mean, he certainly has the ability to win the award.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit more concerned with betting value. That's just kind of where I'm like.
That's just how your mind works. I know.
So like for me, I see him at plus 450, and I'm like, relax.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, look, the only things that I have to say about Strider that are not positive, and I have mostly positive things to say about him. Ton of fly balls off the bat. His ground ball rate 13th percentile. The fastball is actually pretty hittable. Run value on it's pretty average. Barrel rate for him is actually below average. So when he gives up, he can give up some hard contact. Now, generally speaking, the average exit velo for him is around average, but the pitches themselves, the whiff rate, the K rate, the chase rate, the stuff is ridiculous, and the curveball he's been flashing at spring training is definitely a scary thing.
Yeah.
That being said, you look at the 4.39 ERA after the All-Star break last year. He had kind of a rough September quietly. So I'm not 100% bought in on Strider as like this hyper consistent ace. I think there's a little bit too much missing the zone that goes on there. A little bit too much just trying to pump his fastball into barrels. So I think the ceiling is obviously really high.
Yeah.
At plus 450, it's hard for me to see betting value on that one. I'll give you a couple that I like, and you kind of know that I'm looking at things from a betting angle standpoint.
Yeah.
I got 3 that I'm actually looking at in the NL.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if I'm going to bet all 3 of them. I might bet 2 of them. But I like Glasnow at 14-1. The stuff with Glasnow is completely ridiculous. The production with Glasnow is completely ridiculous when he's healthy.
You're just worried about health, right?
If he stays healthy, which at this point he seems to be, signaling, and the Dodgers are signaling that what was leading to repeated health concerns with him is an issue that's behind him. I don't know all the details on that, but that's kind of what we're hearing, right? If he stays healthy all year, pitching in that rotation in that ballpark, and with that pitching lab, watch out, right? He could be really special this year. So 14-1, I think there's some interest there. Um, Chris Sale at 35-1.
Wow.
It's easy to forget like how good that dude is when he's good. And now he
Mm,
moves into the National League with a bunch of teams who haven't seen him much. You touched on the fact that he's going to get to face those Mets, those Nationals, those Marlins as well.
yeah.
Chris Sale being 35-1 while Strider is plus 450. I mean, I'm not even looking at Strider between those two in terms of odds because a Sale like Glass now, if he's healthy, could just mow through the NL this year. It wouldn't shock me. Like,
Not,
like, like, would
yeah.
you
Are
be
you
that
worried about
surprised?
the health there? I mean, you have to be.
Oh, of course, but and you're worried about the health with any pitcher though. At the end of the day,
Mm,
right? Um, but would you be? Let me ask you this: if we look up in August and Chris Sale is 13-3 with a 2.8 ERA, would you actually be that shocked? Like pitching with that lineup behind him, would you be that shocked?
no, no, and that you make a good point because that listen, Chris Sale, as far as stuff and pedigree, I think is among the better pitchers in the game. The problem is, and again, this is the only thing I push back on, and I actually think for like you said, for betting value, it's fantastic. I would take it 100%. Um, Last year, 20 starts with a 4.3 ERA, and again, just for the past couple of years behind that, he made 9 starts and 2 starts, and he's entering his age 35 season.
Mhm.
It's just, like you said, as far as betting is concerned, I think the value is definitely there. There's a lot of concerns for me that's going around right here in the old bean.
Yeah. No, understandable, right? That's why we're looking at him at 35-1, right? That's
Yeah,
why we're getting the number we are. I just think that there's upside there, and when I
certainly.
like the ceiling and the numbers that high, it gets my interest. And I'll touch on the last guy because of the three, the most ridiculous number I saw on the entire board is Joe Musgrove at 50-1.
Wow. Wow.
Like
That stuns me.
you just can't justify that for me. I mean, Joe Musgrove was a guy last year. You look at his like savant page, it doesn't look that different from Spencer Strider's. The fastball is ridiculous, right? The run value on the fastball is 96th percentile, chase rate 99%, expected ERA 90th percentile. Guy pitched to a 305 last year. I mean, what do you want from him, right? I mean,
Yeah.
he was phenomenal.
17 starts. He missed a good portion of the season.
Right, but we're talking about a couple years in a row now for him where he's been excellent, right? Like this is kind of becoming who he is. And so for me, I just look at a pitcher that across the board is really good. San Diego is still a great place. Is still a great place to pitch. He's clearly comfortable there. It's where he's from. To me, Musgrove is kind of a sleeper here. Where if he stays healthy all year, I don't see how he doesn't finish top 5 or 6 in the Cy Young.
Yeah.
And because to me he's the best pitcher on that staff still, right? And for me, he probably finishes top 5 or 6 on that staff in Cy Young if he's healthy, and we're getting him 50-1. Like, I mean, let me. I want to pull up a couple of the names around him just to give you a sense of how silly this is. I mean, we're talking 50-1 with him. That puts him next to Luis Severino. That puts him next. That means that his odds are longer than Hunter Green. Hunter Green. He's got longer odds than Shota Imanaga. Like, what have
Yeah.
any of these dudes proven recently that suggests that they're in the same category with Musgrove? I don't see
Yeah.
it. So for me, Musgrove 51 is crazy value.
Yeah, Musgrove 51 is crazy value. Just an interesting tidbit here, and I know that this might generate some pushback from others, not from me really, because I actually agree with you. But in the 8 years that he's been in the major leagues, right, he has never once even been, and this is just baseball reference. I'm not even going deep. He hasn't even once been a finalist for Cy Youngs. Like he hasn't even been like 10th. Like that's pretty interesting to me. And he's had, I mean, when he was an all-star in 2022, I mean, he made 30 starts, he had a sub 3 ERA. Like
Yeah.
and he didn't get a single Cy Young vote, not one, like not even first place, not one Cy Young vote.
Yeah, he should have.
Yeah,
He should have.
that's pretty crazy.